Gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. I hope everybody's having a beautiful day. I hope the sun is shining. I hope the birds are singing. And I hope you are ready to have your mind blown about the future of leadership. Because I have with me today the incredible Chianti Huang, Ph.D. leadership coach. And I'm excited to introduce her today. She's really doing some pioneering work in the ideas that, let me just introduce her like this. Chianti is a pioneering leadership scholar and PhD researcher at Pepperdine University, specializing in the performance use of psychedelics for leadership. She's also the founder of the Psychedelic Way and an accomplished leadership coach based in New York Metropolitan Area. Chianti's journey began with a thriving career in finance and consulting, where she worked with prestigious Big Four firms, including Deloitte. After her time at Deloitte, she founded LadyCan, a global organization dedicated to inspiring, engaging, and empowering women in leadership positions. Her entrepreneurial spirit then led her to the AI tech startup scene, working with the Dubai government on international AI projects under the Dubai Future Foundation. Chianti's passion for leadership research has driven her to pursue a PhD in global leadership at Pepperdine University, where she has pioneered new academic theories and frameworks for leadership performance. Her interdisciplinary research connects the fields of leadership and behavioral science, applying industry best practices to design and facilitate events that help leaders and teams build capacity, agility, and resilience. As a coach, Chianti works with agency leaders and teams to achieve optimal performance, using data to implement strategies that improve organizational structures and enhance business processes. Her groundbreaking research into the performance use of psychedelics has faced many challenges, but her dedication led to the creation of the Psychedelic Way, a venture supporting entrepreneurs and CEOs in integrating Eastern philosophy and research-based frameworks into their lives. Chianti plans to present her leadership research and preliminary findings at prominent global conferences next year, continually reshaping the field of leadership study with her groundbreaking theory of psychedelic leadership. Please join me in welcoming Chianti. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me today. It's going to be a very fun conversation. So I'm looking forward to start to explore all this topic that we're going to be covered today.
Yeah, I agree. I'm so excited to see the world of psychedelics beginning to move past the medical container. And I think you're pioneering that on some level. You're starting to dig into these ideas about psychedelics and leadership. And I just wanted to give you maybe some time to kind of give us a little bit more background on that. Like, how did that come to be? Like, what's going on there?
Right. I think I went through a very interesting personal journey as a human, as a leader, and also, I guess, as a scholar right now. I am finishing my PhD at Pepperdine University right now. This is my 6 years. It's been a long way here. My story, it's very my story is very interesting because I was born and raised in Beijing, China. I spent 18 years in my country and came here, did my undergrad, MBA, and now to my PhD. So it's been 16 years in this country, observing a lot of very interesting things. And what really led me to where I am right now in terms of my career as a psychedelic leadership coach, and also a researcher and scholar pioneering the performance use of psychedelic, especially psilocybin, in the leadership capability, in the leadership context, is that, just like yourself, I used to work for a big company and corporation.
Right.
And in that process, I feel like part of the human aspect of me is getting squished. And that's when I trying to really starting a new kind of direction into building a platform and community to inspire female leaders. So that was kind of always my heart, even before this PhD started in the global leadership study. Therefore, I had my company called LadyCan for a couple years, not too long, but it was really dedicated to inspire, engage, and empower female leaders and female founders. And so after that, I started to work for a AI startup company, and in which the experience taking me to run international project with Dubai government and such, But during that process, when I was living and working in Dubai for nearly 5 months, I realized the patriarchal culture in the Middle East, where I have never experienced myself as a female businesswoman. So that kind of experience then really facilitated in making the decision of getting a PhD in leadership, because I think that I saw a lot of problem that at the time I was unable to solve with the level that I'm in right now. And I was really inspired to really get into the subject of leadership study and the theory and everything, to understand how can I cultivate a better leader for tomorrow, because we are in a very, very interesting, and I would say even somehow strange situation right now in the world. And I think right now, to be a great leader, to be able to navigate through a very, very complicated landscape, plus all the crises that we're facing as a humanity together, it's requiring different part of the leadership skill, right? I would always say, to my friends, who is not in the field, like I feel like right now, the leadership itself, this concept, is facing a lot of challenges right now. Because before the internet and cell phone was invented, we have a lot of the world leader coming in, and they can be the person that they wanted to show, right? They can act like a certain person or the facade they wanted to show. Right now, the things are very different. You have cell phone everywhere. To be a good leader, there are eyes on you. You have to be authentic. You have to be yourself. So that's why I think the modern age of leadership, it's very different. So we need new ideas, new knowledges, new theory, new framework to support not just the achievement for the leader, but also the development, the self-development, the leadership development. In my framework, I call them the capability development. Because as a leadership coach, I focus more on what I call the inner game of leadership, aka the mental game. I believe that today's leader, the biggest enemy and the biggest limitation is themselves. It's their own brain, it's their own mind that is limiting them for making more achievement and performing better and making better decisions. So I look at what I called a iOS system, the internal operating system of the leader himself, and really trying to identify how this person work from the very deep mental model perspective. How do you make sense? What is your meaning making system? What is your value? What is your problem solving style? What is your code of conduct, and what is your moral? And I think all of these are very, very important in the integration of leaders' mindset. And that's what I'm trying to really achieve also with the research I'm doing. So as a leading scholar in the performance use of psychedelic, especially on psilocybin, I started this journey of inquiry about 2 years ago. Actually, more than 2 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago, when myself was situating myself in a very much like a tech bubble. I used to live in LA, now I'm in New York. But there's a lot of people around me, the Silicon Valley founders and the tech leaders are already been utilizing psilocybin specifically to their performance. So I do recognize that right now there's a lot of attention, energy, and movement on proving the safety use and the legalization of the substance. But the reason why I choose to work with psilocybin specifically for my own research is because I believe the accessibility for psilocybin, we're talking about fungi, is very low. You can't control. We're growing mushroom, and I think a lot of people here didn't know that in many culture, right? Not just in the Aztec or in the Peruvian culture, they have psychedelic. In Chinese culture, we also have psychedelic. It's in an indigenous area, which largely is indigenous population in Yunnan. It's translating to the south of the cloud, which is very beautiful because part of the province is sitting on a very, very high altitude, deep mountain. Half of it is kind of sitting on a jungle-like environment. So mushroom is one of the most famous food locally, and people would go into the forest, go into the jungle, and just do edible mushroom. But right now, because we in China we don't understand not even therapeutic value of psilocybin, so it's still very much illegal in a sense that people perceive mushroom poisoning as what it is. You're sending to the hospital. Oh, you see the little smurf, you see the little spirit and stuff. Oh, it's because you're poisoned. So we're very behind kind of in the psychedelic kind of movement here. But I would argue that in terms of mindfulness and maybe consciousness, the Eastern ideology and religion have a little stronger backbone than the Western science side. So that's, I think, is very, very interesting because the mushroom that we're talking about, it's everywhere.
Right.
It's fungi. And we really know nothing about them. Right now, I think we have nearly 3,000 type of mushroom discovered. And we probably edible, probably 200, 300 type. That we discovered. And these 3,000 type of mushroom we so far discover only consists of very, very small amount. From what I read is something like 0.03%, not even like with the entire fungi family. And the concept of neuroscience and a lot of the brain science, I think that kind of originated from the mushroom because they're all interconnected and that's how they communicate. So all this background that I have and the interest and my particular interest in, getting into understand human and performance and leadership kind of led me to where I am right now.
Yeah. Well, thanks for filling that in. I think it's important to understand someone's framework and the way in which they view themselves in the world in order to understand the work they're doing. And I think you did a good job at defining that. I'm hearing a lot of ideas about dimensionality and awareness, from being to Dubai to living in China to being in LA and New York, all these different cultures and subcultures that you're around.
Yeah.
Are there some interesting through points or some threads that run through all these different communities and performance enhancing psychedelics that you're seeing?
I think the landscape for each part of the world that I experience regarding the practice and the use and the development of psychedelic, it's wildly different. And I think about the Western world as a comeback because there is a deep history and linkage toward using psychedelic as an exploration for mindfulness, consciousness, self-awareness on any level. But in my personal experience, where it's most talked about is in the Western culture. But what is mostly understood on a spiritual, religious, or ideological or mental level, the understanding, I think, is still rooted in the Eastern culture, belief, practice, and knowledges. Because I do think that when we do talk about substance use, right, it's very liberal. It's very liberal in America, right? And that's, in my opinion, a very westernized approach to the problem, because here people like to have something figured out already. You don't want to wait, you want to figure out. And therefore, I think a lot of the psychedelic practice in the Western society tend to be more, there's modality and there's also the formality of it. Right? So here, I think when you are talking about spirituality, the first image I would think most people here think about is something like this: meditation, a posture that you are in, a certain practice that you have. But in Eastern ideology, it's it's less about the formality of it, but more about the practice of it. And very simple and probably not a perfect example is that here people are like, okay, I need to get into a certain state, and I'm going to use meditation to induce that state, to have that experience. And it's very much like I'm going to be sitting in an empty, quiet room and do my process. And that's all great, right? But sometimes I feel like I can meditate while I'm waiting in the line. For 5-10 minutes, I can close my eyes, and that's where I feel centered. That's my practice. So what I'm trying to say is the Eastern is more focused on the actual practice, and the Western is a little bit more focused on like the environment, the formality, the meaning of everything behind it.
Yeah, that makes sense. When I talk to a lot of people in the Western world, they're often talking about meaningful experiences and connection.
That's very important.
Right.
Very important, because everything we do, we make sense of it through meaning making.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems in Western leadership, there's an absence of meaningful communication from the people at the very top and the people that are actually working in the facilities. It's like this divide or this disconnection there on some level. Do you think the psychedelics is that something you're investigating with psychedelics in Western leadership?
Yes, my angle and my lens toward getting into this kind of exploration and my research is really from a perspective of how psychedelic, especially psilocybin, can enable leader to perform better.
Right.
So my framework, let me use an analogy to this. So in terms of capability, I believe that everybody has a plate. That's your ability to handle things, right? And life always throwing at things unexpectedly. And I describe the leadership capability as you are a leader, and when your plate is very strong and big and sturdy, at that period of time that you can handle more. You can handle more stuff that is happening for you, right? Throwing onto your plate. But sometime that when we're stressed or not centered or not synchronized with your true purpose of life and everything, we feel very misaligned and we feel overwhelmed. And this is when I use the analogy of the plate. The capability is becoming more fragile and more thin. So any extra piece of stuff that's throwing onto your plate suddenly feel very, very overwhelming. So I believe that for a leader, in order to maintain that performance and efficiency, the ability to make the most effective and the best decision, you have to try to maintain a bigger and sturdier plate because leadership, it's very lonely. It's a very, very lonely. I went through it myself. And that's why, as an entrepreneur, I had a lot of understanding and sympathy and empathy, actually, to understand what it takes to be a leader and what they have to sacrifice or give up to do the work that they wanted to do right now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What do you think is the relationship in a leadership framework between sacrifice and surrender?
I think sacrifice, it's a it's a very strong word, for example, right? Sacrifice is that you believe that you have done something that maybe is not necessarily right, and that itself put you into a more negative a pattern of thinking. And the second word that you mentioned is what?
Surrender? Right.
Surrender.
Yeah.
Yeah, surrender by the essence is acceptance. It's the first thing. You have to really accept who you are and the situation you are in. And believe it or not, for a lot of leader, this is hard because in order to do what they have been doing, or in order to run or fly, or or race, let's say, in this world, for that speed, sometimes there's no mercy. Sometimes you can't stop. Sometimes there's not space for you, to make reflection or think about that, everything happens, make perfect sense. So I think that tied to ego, of course,
Yeah.
tied to the leader's identity and how much they don't want to let go. Because Eastern philosophy, especially Taoism, is really just focusing on the idea of shifting your mind. So it's not about the resolution of the problem, it's about the elimination of the problem,
Mm.
right? So the problem disappear. That's really, I know that sounds like a really hard to achieve in practice, but that's in the essence, that's what Taoism is to shift your mind, because Taoism is all about nature. The Tao is the algorithm of the universe that nobody really supposed to know, right? I really believe that, of course, I read a lot about all interesting stuff, religion, technology, all sort of stuff. But I really believe that for human being, we have two programs that we cannot run out of, no matter how our technology going to develop. First of all, we cannot avoid death, because death is
Right.
program, is part of our program. Death make everything meaningful. If we all live forever, there's the meaning for that,
Right.
right? Probably a new layer of meaning if everybody can reach 200 years old at some point, right? The second algorithm that we cannot run out of is this universe.
Mm.
With the human nature and how we're designed physiologically, psychologically, biologically, we cannot really hack. Of course, we wanted to know the answer. We wanted to have the wisdom to understand the universe. But I think that we were designed not to be able to. If you look at quantum physics and everything, it's just crazy. You understand how big the universe is, and the growth is exponential. And to get out of our solar system gonna take like yesterday I watched this video. I believe it's about 40 million 4万年, so 40,000, yeah, long time, almost impossible. So that's why it makes it interesting, right? Because we have this life that
Yeah.
we are in right now collectively, and we are all trying to figure out what is the meaning of this life. Whatever the religion you choose to, rely on to get your answer, to get your truth, right? I'm more like Eastern, but I also study a little bit of the Christianity. I study a little bit Judaism. I study a little bit Islamic when I was in, that's another world, and India. Like it's very complicated
Mm.
religion. I would like to spend another episode and talk about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It blows my mind to see, particularly in the Western world and
Mm,
maybe some multinational corporations, but
mm,
when I think of like Fortune 500 companies, I think of companies who have built a business model that's built on exponential growth. And you've
mm,
spoken briefly about this idea of just conquering and growing, but death
mm,
makes everything meaningful. I'm
mm.
hopeful that the psychedelics may introduce that into some of the leaderships, which will translate into a better understanding of how we work together with nature, sort of like the Eastern culture. I'm
Oh,
wondering, what are your thoughts on that? And might psychedelics play a part in that, kind of catching up the Western ideas of leadership to the Eastern ideas?
yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I think the essence about psychedelic that we're talking about plant, and it
Right.
is plant medicine, right? So of course the Eastern culture have a little bit more history and the root of the application and the utilization of that, right? The first book that we have in China that really talk about and confirming the benefit for herbs is one of the most famous book called 本草纲目. It's basically a doctor, uh, hundreds years ago. I'm not sure about the history, but very very long time ago, even 1,000 years ago, he tasted a lot of the plant on the earth, of course, in the Chinese area or in the region, and he write down this, and this is kind of the basic for a lot of the Chinese medicine right now that we're still practicing and utilizing. But I think in speaking of psychedelic itself, it's a medicine or substance or whatever, however you want to call it. And the nature value of that, I think that's the reason why, the five classic psychedelic, ketamine, MDMA, DMT, psilocybin, ibogaine, I only choose to study and do research with psilocybin, or DMT. I personally don't have experience with DMT yet. I heard wild, experience and personal subjective experience with that. But I really believe psilocybin, it's a little bit unique in the group of the whatever 5, 10, psychedelic that we're commonly talk about right now,
Sure.
because it's from nature, because it's fungi. I really believe, the magical or the potential of mushroom, because now we have already discovered the functional use of mushroom that is proven. So I really believe that psilocybin specifically have a lot of potential to be discovered, to be studied, to be uncovered, and to be reviewed, because psychedelic existed for a very long time in human history, no matter it's Aztec, Mayan, whoever utilizing it for spiritual purposes. I went to a Maya ruin before, and before I was standing in front of the ruin, I don't think I had that connection or that imagination or uh, that understanding about how they do the human sacrifice.
Mm.
Because we have a lot of human sacrifice in Shang Dynasty in China. So that was very early. That was like, forgive me on this, I'm probably not very accurate on years, but probably 2,000 years,
Mhm.
something like 1,000 years ago. And I kept thinking about that. I kept thinking about the evolution of humanity. Why do we do this, right? Of
Yeah.
course, it's usually the war, whoever lost the war being sacrificed. But when I actually went to the Maya ruin, I realized not everybody can be sacrificed. It's usually the lead or the head, or like a very spiritual person from your enemy, and they
Mm.
lost the war, and they are eligible
Mhm.
to do that. And the process of human sacrifice is also, of course, it's very bloody, it's very barbarian, but I also can sense that the spiritual implication of it, because they pretty much lay the person on the altar, which is on the top of this shape, and they skin the person.
Whoa.
I remember it right. They peel the skin, they take the heart out, and it's very methodical. I'm sure every procedure have an implication for it. And from what I remember, sometime they wear the skin of the deceased spirit, and they dance with it. Of course, this is all conducted by shaman there. So the entire process, after I study it, I think is very interesting, and I think this type of ceremonial interpretation or the use of psychedelic in conjunction with that, um, it's beyond what we are doing psychedelic recreationally right now.
Yeah. Mm.
Right? So that's what I feel like the really connection to the nature is, that when you are experiencing that, the life and the death and the medicine and the nature all together, I think that's a very different experience.
Yeah. I think on some level it would be interesting if we brought back this sort of sacrifice. Like if one company takes over another company, they get to like skin the CEO and like take it's I know that sounds so brutal, but in some ways I feel like the CEOs are taking the heart out of the people that I
Right.
feel like they're sacrificing their workers on a lot of levels, you know, and
But they
when you
don't
take
respect us, right? When
not
we
at all, not at all.
in front of us, we all appreciate, we all respect, we all
Yeah,
hope for better. But what you're talking about is very interesting, which is, yeah, it's kind of realistic right now. We sacrifice a lot of employee
a lot of
capitalist
them.
sector right now. You know,
Yeah,
people never than before in my tech sector, everybody is even nervous about,
sure.
being laying off. I've never seen this before, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting to see where we're at. And do you ever get the feeling that, you know, the same way that particularly psilocybin sort of comes in waves and it has a, you know, like a 4 to 6 hour period of elevation and then come down? Do you
Mm,
think that there's patterns like that for leaders in the West and East? Is there styles of leadership that come up and then come down the same as psychedelics? Is it seasonal, and are those two things related?
that's a very interesting question. I'll try my best to
Yeah.
answer. Sorry, for the peak time in synchronization with the rise and fall of the modern leadership. I would like to focus on the second part of this
Yeah.
because I don't
Please.
know about too in detail about the peak time and the experience, subjective experience here. But I really think that the modern age of leadership require so much understanding and awareness of self, and also so
Hmm.
much understanding and awareness, and more importantly, connectiveness, the sense of connection
Yeah.
with other people. But the sense of connection start with self. If you can't even connect
Yeah.
with yourself, how can you connect with other people, right?
Yeah.
So the question you're asking is really about three keywords, which is kind of in alignment with my ongoing research right now, that I just finished collection of the first round of the data by survey, is that is how important is empathy,
Hmm.
ego, and collaboration, right? Team working, right? I think these are the three kind of guiding principle, because I can't speak for my data right now before I don't have it. Um, but these are the three anchor kind of for my research. I'm very, very curious to explore and to understand how ego and empathy play a
Yeah.
role, because I do believe, as what you said before, just for example, the human sacrifice, which is
Mm.
kind of inappropriate to talk about in this,
Totally, totally is.
but we need a leader that recognize
Yeah.
employee are doing their own version of compromisation and hardworking in their own way, and they also deserve, to treat as a human rather than a machine, rather than a number in your sheet, when you have to report that. And I think that's the problem
Yeah.
of the modern society, and that's a problem of the modern leadership right now, because you could have very conscious leader, you could have very servant type of leadership that they really care about people and human first, right? But
Yeah.
then the reality is that to be where they are right now, to sit in that position, sometimes is very conflicting, because they will hear from the stakeholder
Sure.
they want to see that growth, they want to see that number. That's the single definition, the factor to define success of leadership. And if we can have more metrics to define who is a better leader, not just rely on the number, I think
Yeah.
that's when things can start changing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's a beautiful way to think about it. And then I'm curious about your research on the aspect of,
Mm.
are you investigating individual leaders with psilocybin, or are you And on top of that, are you investigating the way leaders interact with their immediate team and their employees using psilocybin together? I mean, what does the study look like?
So the study went through several versions of redesign,
Okay.
two version of them, because at the very beginning, I think the truth that what I'm trying to get,
Yeah.
understand how psilocybin can impact on leadership performance, on leadership capability, starting from the idea of go ahead and interviewing CEOs
Right.
who have transformative experience. But because there's IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board in
Hmm.
academia, and they really exist in protection of the confidentiality and the safety of my study subject,
Yeah.
which is my participant right now.
Right.
They have a little bit more stringent kind of procedure in terms of evaluating the risk. So in their eye, if I'm going ahead and interview CEO, that'll be a higher risk, and it's going to take longer time for the study to approval, which
Mm.
I do understand in this modern time because psychedelic is not fully legal yet.
Right.
And if you interview CEOs, and even though they self willing to disclosure or they don't really care that much, it's still a risk because their stakeholder don't
Yep.
like it, and they're like, well, you're talking about this. Therefore, I have to really think through the design of my methodology. And right now, instead of interview the leader themselves, I am now collecting data and what I call the secondary data, the
Nice.
secondhand data, access to knowledge through the lens and the perspective of practitioners, therapists, coaches, podcast. You are a person that traditionally not a expert in this
Right.
field, which I'm looking for in my participant expert, but you have access to knowledge. So
True.
in this process, I also have to interview and really conjure a lot of the expert and thought leader in psychedelic industry to understand as a researcher coming to do this study, to do this research, what can I um, establish as my inclusion criteria to define who are the expert in this industry. Because this is an emerging field and it's very new. A lot of my classmates in the PhD program, when they look for participant, they can just put a number.
Right.
They say, in this vertical, we're
Mm.
looking for a person 20 years of experience. And I realized that if I put that in, I get nobody, but probably few of the generational shaman if I'm lucky. So I have to really go ahead and understand who is expert in this industry and how do I define them? How can I include
Mm.
them? How can I collect those insights for this study? So I'm very lucky and very comforting at this moment, finishing just my first round of data collection. I'm going to do 2 to 3 rounds, eventually um, reach to an expert consensus for all the thought leader and industry expert. So what I'm doing, it's quite straightforward in this particular sense. So I did a really in-depth literature review all the way from 1955 at the very beginning of the psychedelic journey until now, present. And you can imagine there are not a lot of data
Right.
available there during those period of time, especially when I started the study almost 2.5, 3 years ago, because neuroscience
Right.
has been developed in the 70s, basically, right? With technology and everything, we're able to see the brain activity and the neuroplasticity and everything like that. And these are the 50 years that psychedelic science has been basically stagnated because of the legal hurdle, because the stigmatization.
Yeah.
And part of the journey I'm in right now as a scholar, as a research, as a coach, it's really helped to establish a new term, really for the first time in academia, outside of the therapeutic framework and investigation. Um, this largely when we now talk about psychedelic, it's all about therapy. And I personally see the psychedelic renaissance or movement or a new era for this. It's really, really starting from a different perspective. I really believe that the psychedelic industry is kind of going through a interesting period of time, kind of similar to how marijuana industry started, because I also did a lot of research in CBD and the marijuana industry prior to
Right.
this. And I see that the marijuana industry started with the medicinal use, with a lot of validation and proof from the veterans early on. And now look at the blue ocean. This is all about the recreational use. Um, as a researcher, I would be very careful to use the recreational um, word in terms of psychedelic, because we all know psychedelic itself, especially the naturally occurring psychedelic, DMT and psilocybin, is not supposed to be approached from a mindset that this is for fun, entertainment, or recreation. Therefore, I'm trying to establish in academia, I call this the performance use, because it's anything other than therapeutic. So the therapeutic in my framework means to deal with anything that is in the past or probably present, right? But
Mhm.
most past, it's any function that needs to be restored or to repair. But coaching and psychedelic and all this personal development, leadership capability building is what I call present and the future. So I wanted to establish this kind of use
Yeah.
case in academia, in science, because we're not looking at people only approaching psychedelic, especially psilocybin, for trauma or OCD or PTSD or tobacco dependence or alcohol cessation, right? A lot of the people already has been through the healing process of it, right? Maybe they're still in, maybe they're halfway in, maybe they're nearly done. We don't
Mhm.
know. But I think the performance market will be the blue ocean in the future. Especially, we talked about the accessibility of psilocybin. It's so low. Like ayahuasca, you will have to acquire it unless you inhale pure DMT that can be acquired through laboratory. But I believe most people who experiencing DMT in the format of ayahuasca ceremony, they actually highly value the meaning and the surrounding, the set and setting, the ceremony, because I think for ayahuasca specifically, the connection, the telepathy happens between, those circle, those journey are one of the key experience, one of the key factor for the transformative experience. But psilocybin is different. It is a different substance, right? Right now we talk about psychedelic as they're all like, right. The definition is mind altering, right? But we are so new in the exploration of our mind right now because we're a baby in terms of neuroscience
Mm.
and brain science in our humanity right now. And we just started to understand the very surface of those things. And that's why, through this journey of learning, investigation, exploring, or confirming, you would say, I went back to the Eastern science. I went back to the Eastern ideology. I already explored Western practice, the Western religion, a lot of the Western world, and I cannot get my answer fulfilled. I cannot get to the layer of the truth, the ultimate truth. I think all the scientists and all the scholar was trying to chase is we wanted to understand the truth. So in
Mhm.
speaking of truth, and back to our point about my research, because I cannot really talk to the with my design of the methodology right now, I can't talk to the CEO themselves. Um, but I have designed in the first round of the data collection allow those expert by my definition. for my inclusion criteria, the participant, to contribute those anecdotal data that are traditionally not associating with academic research, right? Because we know, particularly for psychedelic, the insight, the truth, and the wisdom, it's in the collective mind. It's in people's experience. It's not in the research. It's not in a literature review that I spent so much time, trying to going through and combing through and digging the rabbit hole. So that's where I hope the data for my particular research can there's a word for when you're like shooting a gun, like you calculate to the center,
like the not the trajectory, but you're the
anchor of all of that. Yes.
yeah. It makes, I think I'm really excited to read it, and I'm excited that you have taken the responsibility and the courageousness and the curiosity to do it. And it seems interesting to me. Instead of going, for reasons we've spoken about, you can't exactly talk to the top person, but maybe that's where the actual reality and truth lies, is not in the top person. Like, that's just a very narrow idea of what performance is. And you're going out and you are tapping in to the real veins of what is performance. Like, you're getting a holistic view of performance, which most people would just get a narrow perspective of. I think it's going to be really rich, and I'm really excited for you to get to do it and share it with people. We got one question from the audience that came in right here, and I'll throw it your way. This one's from Clint Kyle, Psychedelic Christian Podcast. Have you noticed any correlation between your participants' religious, spiritual perspectives and their thoughts or responses to psychedelics?
That's a wildly interesting question. Thank you for asking. And unfortunately, I did not collect those data points. I did not ask for their spiritual background or their religion or their belief. If I do have those data points, I may be able to make a speculation or correlation about that. But it's very interesting. Maybe the next research, maybe the book I'm writing, I should ask that.
Yeah, that's a great one. Thanks, Clint, for chiming in there. Another area that I think is fascinating to embark on is have you found anything that you can talk about that you weren't expecting to find?
Oh, that's a good question. My data set in front of me right now.
Right.
What I didn't, that is a little bit surprise so far, just finished the first round of data collection, is a lot of the people focusing on elaborating or contributing those evidence in relating to the sense of connection more than I anticipated. I can't speak for my data yet, but I thought more of the responses will validate or having supporting evidence more in the department of the three things I mentioned, which is ego, empathy, and teamwork. And I think teamwork require a lot of empathy. There's communication, a lot of factor, compassion, for example, openness, connectiveness to self and to others and to nature are the three things that I see in my study that is kind of not what I expecting for so much. And I think that itself can form a new theory or framework. So I'm excited to look at my data later tonight.
It would be fascinating to, it's probably not possible to do this, but it would be fascinating to see like a Briggs-Myers or a personality test somebody takes before and then after a year of use, and see if there's any major changes that you could correlate to their leadership style or their personality style. Kind of interesting to think about.
Well, I'm not sure about whether psychedelic have correlation or can have impact on personality. But the problem that a lot of people are facing right now is, I am a social scientist. So I approach my social science by the essence is that we study phenomena,
Okay.
right? We're not the laboratory wearing the white, So I think from a social science perspective, of course, there's limitation. And we talk about it in our research, right? The limitation for everything. Also, my researcher's disposition, which is very important.
Yeah.
Because some people, they have a lot of disposition or experience, right? And you wanted to disclose that in your research because your perspective as a researcher is very important, dictating the process and the direction of the study and the steps of the study.
This is kind of out there, this question, but it's subjective in a way. But on some level, I think that it's almost contagious. Like the use of psilocybin is contagious in that when a leader begins transforming the way they lead, so too do they change the people that work underneath them. And it's not maybe the formal sense of contagion, but it is kind of contagious in a weird sort of way, like those ripple effect of changes, right? Is that too far out there?
Yeah. You're right about it. But first of all, we need to come to the same sense about what leadership is.
Right.
Let me ask you a question here.
Oh, okay.
What do you think leadership is? What makes a leader, a good, strong leader?
I think a leader does the right thing. I heard a quote once that said, managers do things right and a leader does the right thing. And when you're in charge, you have to do the right thing regardless. And that's for each leader decides what that right thing is. But I think the right thing is for the relationship and the environment versus the profit model. Now, I'm not a CEO and I haven't written down or signed off a waiver that says I'm strictly beholden to the shareholders. Maybe that's why they do their idea of the right thing. But I would say a leader does the right thing.
That's a good definition. And
Yeah.
my definition of leader, it's the most generic. I define leader as whether they have followers. So unfortunately, this is very sad because unfortunately,
Yeah.
it does make the social influencer that we saw on the internet. These are
Yeah.
leaders in our time, and that's why I do believe the area of leadership. Of course, it sounds very intimidating. It sounds like, oh, only like I need to have this title to be a leader. I invite everybody to think about the impact that you can
Yeah.
make as a leader individually. There are eyes on you. You have followers. Every one of us have a follower,
Yeah.
more or less, right? And how can you use your voice and your identity and your thought to really put the impact on people, right? I think that's everybody's question, not just the people who wearing the hat in the corporation or the startup or on the internet. So that's why I think leadership is very important because we are going into a very interesting time in this earth right
Yeah.
now where technology took away our ability to discern. The discernment it's I think is very, very important right now. As a leader, you have to be able to discern what is good or bad. As a leader, you really have to, more than ever before, understand yourself and be able to connect to yourself and be open enough to accept whatever may be outside of your pattern, your traditional, your comfort, your sense making. We need to be open about it, right? And at the same time, I think a good leader is the one who really make other people's life and impact them and make them wanted to be a better person. That's
Yeah.
what I think the true leadership is, coming into this very siloed and independent, right? Because any one of us can become a leader on social media if we have followers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that's a great definition, by the way. I think it's an interesting way and on some level, I think it helps people understand that they have a responsibility to become the best version of themselves, you know?
Yes, yes, yes. And that brings a very interesting point. And I can't really elaborate on this because I don't have my data out yet.
Right?
But I'm very, very interested to see the correlation between intuition and
Mm,
experience of psychedelic.
yeah.
Because intuition is something that is dedicating every single one of us, right? At the top leader, they still have to make a lot of choices on a daily basis. We may think about leaders' role as a strong, leading, always know what's right, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
right? But in the real practice of leaders, what I see in my leadership coaching practice, basically specifically working with CEOs and founders and Silicon Valley founders, tech founders, creative leader. What I see is at the very initial entrepreneurship, right? The first couple years of the company, while everything is stable and running itself, um, every single day, their job is more of a firefighter.
Mm,
They put out fire. It just, whoever the problem cannot be solved, accelerated to the CEO, for a smaller, medium-sized organization. So a lot of the time, the leadership is not as fancy as important decision all the time. Sometimes they're just really trying to make things running, and that's where I bring in the framework and the concept of the leadership capability as analogy of a plate.
yeah.
Because when you have to perform, because leader, you don't have, as an employee, you can be like, today I don't feel good, I don't have to do this. Leader often don't have choice. It's very stressful. They feel like they've been putting on a pedestal, but a lot of people, especially female leaders,
Mm,
75, more than 75 of the female leaders suffer imposter syndrome. And that number for a guy is, for male leader, is a lot lower. It's in the 50, 60% range. So, that's interesting because as a woman, we always try to, we were told
mm.
that we're not enough, more likely, right? And we try to look at our own problem when things happen. And of course, that's again, ego, empathy, collaboration, compassion. This is everything that my research is really evolving and focusing on.
Yeah. Those are great points. The idea of intuition and awareness and relationships. I think
Mm,
psychedelics are something that changes the way you relate to yourself on some levels. Is that some of the what kind of information are you seeing in your data set
mm,
about relationships?
mm. I think you're asking about the connectiveness.
Yeah.
That's kind of the language in this research. I think if people cannot feel very connected with themselves, they can't really connect with other
Yeah.
people.
That's a good point.
And if they can't feel the connection with nature, they can't really connect with other people. So
Right.
go back to the intuition topic. We're making lots of decisions on a daily basis, and leader makes more decisions, big or small, on daily basis. And I really believe that we are logical creatures.
Mm,
So every time we make decision, our brain, our left brain, is trying to make sense of it. And it's going to tell you, I wanted to choose option 1, 2, 3, number 3, because 1, 2, 3 point, right? But I do believe that in the moment of the decision making, that is our intuition that making the majority and the bigger impact of the actual decision, because our intuition is the inner compass running in the back radar, and our brain feel like this is the best after factor in all the possible data, right? It's a very complicated system because you need experience, right? The brain need experience. The brain also need knowledge, right? So you're combining the future risk, the task positive brain, and the default mode brain, which is more focusing on the presence, and the other one is present and future. The other one is more focusing on worrying and the past to protect us. If a tiger here, we gotta run. We need to worry. So these are our protecting mechanism. And I think the intuition lies in the middle.
Mm.
Flash, it's a feeling. You can't explain it, but you know what you're going to choose, one, two, or three. You already made a decision at the moment, at a short moment, but then your left brain later on trying to make logical analysis to convince your right brain that, look, this is good because of one, two, three. So, but again, understanding intuition, more importantly, measure the intuition. That's very difficult, right? That's,
Yeah.
you need neuroscience, you need
Right.
all the environment allow you to really understand that. But that's fascinating to me because
Yeah.
I really believe that the right brain is really that dedicating to our decision making, to the overall, you know, to our life. And the left brain is what I called a little inferior side. The right brain understand the concept and
Right.
abstract and the creativity and everything. So
Yeah.
Hell from the both side of the brain is I highly recommend that book. Very interesting, written by neuroscience, very famous. And if the audience have interested in understanding the neuroscience in conjunction with the psychedelic, I highly recommend that book.
What was the name of the book again?
Tales from both sides of the brain.
Oh, I like that.
It's very interesting. A lot of the research, experimentation back and understand how our brain works.
Yeah. Ian McGilchrist has a really cool book that's similar. It's The Master and His Emissary. He talks about the right brain, left brain, and do you is in your opinion, or in maybe some of the research you're doing or something you've read, do you think that maybe that's what is making a better leader, is someone who is, maybe outside the default mode network, who is using both sides of the brain? When you see these scans, you see the brain kind of lit up and making these new connections. Is there something to be said about using more of your brain or having more synaptic activity and being a leader versus using the default mode network?
I don't really know about that part, but personally, I think the ability to be present
Yeah.
is very important in today's leadership because there are so many factor, so many uncertainty than
Mm-hmm.
before. In order to make that best decision, sometimes you can't just look at factors right now because factors are not enough for people to make decisions. And you really have to have that inner compass as a leader. And what is the inner compass? It's everything I said in the iOS system that I'm working with.
Right.
It's your sense making, meanings making, your value, your belief, your identity, your code of conduct, your moral and ethical belief, right? Conduct. A lot of the leader don't think about it. Right now, I go to a company, no matter selling furnitures or anything, right? Or services or drinks or garment. I go and I click on their mission vision page and I see if they have a statement for code of conduct or ethical, because that's what I think is sustainable as a company. You need to build a sustainable business model to make the business last.
Yeah, you have to have a solid foundation, and once you steer off that foundation, everything comes off the rails, it seems like.
Right. That's the inner compass and the inner radar. And I think a lot of the leader, first of all, thinking about prioritizing more on the monetary, on the return, on the actual metrics,
Yeah.
right? And they did not hold strongly on their personal boundary in terms of ethical, moral, and the code of conduct in that department. And that is when I see a lot of the people started to get frustrated or lost, because their code of conduct or their ethical, moral is coming from another company. It's whatever other people say.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I put this in and like this word is the key words. But I really think these needs to be from a person's authentic belief and authentic self-expression. Like what is really important, that boundary, I think is helping people to navigate through a more complicated landscape in terms of leadership and development.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thankful, and I'm really looking forward to not only reading the research, but hopeful that people are able to take it and implement it in their lives. Because I think that so many people are searching for connection. They're searching for leadership. They're searching for their own inner compass and stuff. So I think there's going to be some really cool results on there about
Mhm.
um
Yeah, the
what yeah,
connection. Yeah, I was going to elaborate a little
right,
bit.
please.
The connection part is what I see. If
Right,
anything, it's going to a different point in the Western
right.
uh, culture or society. It's because of the sense of connectiveness. The Western world, the capitalist, the pure capitalist
Mm,
society structure that you've been building here, uh, does not allow that. It's not built to, for example, taking care of the elders.
yeah,
When we talk about the uh, desire or the chase or the investigation about knowledge and wisdom that a lot of younger generation of people seems to want it a shortcut, right? It's
hmm,
like I expect I'm gonna go for a retreat, I'm gonna take this, and I have an expectation that my life will change in
right.
whatever the way. And that's why I feel like we can't call psychedelic recreational because you can't have expectation. Things happen for you, not to.
Mm,
That's what I believe. Things will happen for you at the right time that you needed it. And that's the trust, right? When we're talking about, oh, you're trusting the universe, trust, all these terms. And like, what are we really talking about? Right? And I think the ability to be present, as I mentioned in the leadership practice, ability to connect with yourself, ability to really trust your intuition, it's very, very important. But again, these things are hard to put into measurement, to put into practice. Because when you're actually in the leadership role and dealing with all the put out the fire, every day you wake up and you put out fire for a couple of years, your
yeah,
brain's not in that space. Your brain is constantly in a problem solving space. And that's why, as a leadership coach, I kind of provide a safe and a consistent space for the leader to come in and to really get clarity about their life right now in a very bigger sense. Are they aligned with their purpose, collective purposes, business, personal purpose, individual, right? I
yeah,
believe a lot of people feel the suffer or living in pain or feeling like burnout or their capability is not enough to handle the food on the plate, per se, in this analogy, is because they don't feel the connection. As you mentioned, that is the source. In a lot of Eastern culture, our connection, a very simple example, to our elders, to our family, is a little bit more tight than the
yeah,
Western culture. Here, you say it like it's a pride things to do that I kick my children out of the house,
yeah,
18 years old. I get it. I get it that you're adult, you independent, Western independent, but it tells me the ideology here. The older people, in general speaking, is not as respected as at least in Chinese, and I know certainly Korean,
Yeah.
Japanese culture very focused on the is that philia petty. There's a word for that, the seniority, respecting the elder. And because we believe and we respect that the knowledge and the wisdom that they're having is because they live longer time, so they understand. And here, families are in a different structure, right? You have nuclear family, and often in Eastern culture, we multi-generation,
Yeah.
right? In a lot of Spanish culture too, multi-generation family. Here, it's very siloed. So you're definitely right on when you mentioned the connectiveness. I think this is the problem with a lot of, again, drug use and mental health crisis is all because people feel less connected than before. When I grew up, I was born in the late 80s, and when I was young, I remember going to, my parents are busy. Mom is a professional working woman, finance executive. So I remember my childhood is like families are busy, but I go to my neighbor's home.
Mm.
My neighbors, my classmates, mom cook. So I eat at this house and eat at that
Yeah.
house. And right now, everything is so siloed here. People have to pay for the daycare, our community again, right? Talking about that, the connection, the support system is very different right now.
Yeah. I feel like it's coming full circle in the West. So many of like the baby boomer generation, they live their own lives, and now we see this epidemic of loneliness. Like they kicked out their kids so early and were like, go to be independent. And they were probably taught that way, and now they're like, how come you never come around? Like, well, you kicked everybody out early. Like you didn't want them. It seemed like it. It
Mhm.
seems like it's that cycle though. Like it if you treat your kid one way, they're gonna come back and treat you one way. So we need leadership in the family as well as in the corporate world.
That's very interesting. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. It's there's something to be said about psychedelics and language as well. When you spoke about being a leader, often leaders will have team meetings or meetings, and a lot of people hang on the words they use, and they have different vocabularies and different understandings of those words. And it
Mm,
seems to me in the psychedelic state, new linguistic pathways are sort of revealed to you. What is, I know it's kind of a large question, but is there a through line there?
mm. I think the root of this question is sitting again in the word of connectiveness.
Mm,
Psychedelic allow us, in my own interpretation, uh, open up this people call portal, whatever, right brain, right? That
right,
intuitive path that allow you to make connection with what I call collective wisdom, collective consciousness, collective unconsciousness based on
hmm,
Carrion theory or God or whatever you
right,
call it, right? So I really believe that psychedelic experience help people to communicate in, how can I say this, less semantic, less linguistic way,
mm,
but more through the collective wisdom, more through the collective consciousness. I try not to use
yeah,
the word like telepathy or vibration or frequency,
right,
right? I really do believe that the world that we're living in right now, and the older I get, the more strongly I feel.
right,
It feels like a simulation right now. Every single day, and I don't watch news and stuff, but sometimes I hear them on the TV. I'm like, oh my God, this type of news, even 10 years ago, would be like explosive. It would be
right,
so much more attention. We're talking about war, like all this crazy things happening right now that people feel very uncertain about right now at this moment in history, humanity collectively. But we can't navigate through this. And I think in this type of time, in the modern time, with the technology, technology is forcing us to use the left brain more.
Mm,
Right? It's all
yeah.
about analytical. And our right brain maybe is not as stimulated and used as much because a lot of people don't trust anymore. There's people used to be more open to things, more trusting to things. And that goes to our first topic, a first
Yeah.
keyword is discernment.
Yeah.
If you can't even discern, if you can't even understand like what is real and what is not with the AI, with everything right now, I know a lot of the platform, social media platform, especially Facebook, Meta, Instagram, are now highly suggesting or recommending people. Of course, they can't really enforce it to label the content that they post on social media as made with AI, right?
Mm,
But how they're going to enforce it? I've seen every interesting video sometime that I see online. The first couple comments, there's going to be one in the top 10 or top 5 saying something like, this is AI, this is not real. Why would you guys even trying to make a discussion under a piece of content that is not realistic? Right? So again, that's another topic. We're talking about the big tech and their responsibility
yeah.
in privacy. Do we own our data? What is our privacy right now? Like, Google knows more than Google knows about you
Yeah.
before you even know what to buy and what to take action on next. So that's, again, I think it's a bigger problem that exists right now, creating a lot of the problem that we talked about before in terms of discernment, connectivity with other people, trust, the self part, the self-development part, the leadership part of this.
Yeah. It makes total sense. I'm really excited to see you in particular. I think you're pioneering this work. I haven't talked to anybody else who's really doing the research on leadership and psychedelics. So thank you for that. And it's a fascinating conversation. I can't wait to dig in deeper as more things come out. I hope you'll come back and definitely get into it deeper, discuss the results, and maybe bring more people in, have a bigger conversation. But before I let you go, where can people find you? Can they, if they want to reach out to you, if they have something to add or they're interested in what you're doing, is there a particular place they can find you? And what do you got coming up?
Yes. So first of all, I am determined to publish this research within this year or probably next. There's a long process to get that, and the good news is right now we have a journal. I don't know if you know this. Since 2023, we have a psychedelic journal for the first time. We have our own field and journal that we can publish on. So that's very excited about that. Where you can find me, the psychedelicway.com, the psychedelicway.com. So that's where you can book a call with me, personal, or if you wanted, leadership coach with the background and the evidence-based kind of methodology and framework like myself. That's where you can find a lot of the information.
Fantastic. I would encourage everybody who's listening to this, whether you're watching it live or whether you're listening to a podcast in the next few days or the next few years, go down to the show notes and reach out to Chianti. She's an incredible background, speaks multiple languages and seen the world from different lenses, from Dubai to China to New York to LA, and an incredible source of knowledge. I would encourage everyone to reach out to her if you're curious, and hang on briefly afterwards. Chianti, I just want to talk to you briefly, but to everybody else, I hope you have a beautiful day. And think about the ideas that we put out here today between psychedelics and leadership. That's all we got, ladies and gentlemen. Have a beautiful
Thank you,
day.
everyone. Bye.